When you think of World War II tanks, what comes to mind? Probably German Tigers, Soviet T-34s, or American Shermans. But what about the Italians? Italy's role in the war is often overshadowed, and their military hardware is frequently dismissed. Today, we're going to change that. We're diving deep into the fascinating, and sometimes frustrating, world of every single Italian vehicle that saw service in the Second World War. From the Alps to the North African desert, these machines fought for the Regio Esercito, the Royal Italian Army. Some were innovative, some were hopelessly outdated, but they all have a story to tell. So grab your gear, because we're about to embark on a complete historical tour of Italy's wartime arsenal. Let's start with the smallest of the small, the tankettes. Before the war, the idea of a tiny two-man armored vehicle was popular. Italy went all-in on this concept, adopting the British Carden Loyd design and producing it as the Carro Veloce 33, or CV-33. It was light, fast, and cheap to produce. Armed with just a machine gun, its armor was so thin it could barely stop rifle fire. Because it was basically an Italian copy of the French Renault FT from World War I. It was decent for reconnaissance, but it was still severely undergunned and under-armored compared to Allied light tanks like the Stuart. You'd find them serving in North Africa, Russia, and the Balkans, often out of necessity rather than choice. They were nimble, but they just couldn't stand up to a real fight. Now for the category Italy is most known for, the medium tanks. And this is where things get complicated. Realizing the M11's shortcomings, the Italians quickly developed the M1340s. This was a huge step up. It finally put the main gun, a much better 47mm cannon, in a fully rotating turret. This tank became the symbol of the Italian Ariete and Littorio armored divisions in North Africa. It was a solid design for 1940, roughly equivalent to the early British cruiser tanks or the German Panzer III. But here's the problem. Italy struggled to improve it. As the Allies introduced tanks like the Grant and the Sherman, with their powerful 75mm guns, the M1340s and its slightly improved successors, the M1441 and M1542, were left in the dust. They were mechanically unreliable in the harsh desert conditions, and their riveted armor had a tendency to spoil, sending deadly metal shards flying inside the crew compartment when hit. They were brave machines, but they were fighting an uphill battle against superior technology and industrial might. What about heavy tanks? Well, this is a short chapter. Italy's only operational heavy tank was the Carro Armato P2640s. The P stands for Pesante or heavy. Developed late in the war, it was heavy by Italian standards, but it would have been classified as a medium tank by any other nation. It had a good 75mm gun and sloped armor, showing the Italians were learning from combat experience. It was a promising design, arguably Italy's best tank of the war, but production was incredibly slow. By the time of the Italian armistice in September 1943, only a handful had been completed. The Germans seized the factories and the completed tanks, pressing them into their own service to fight against the Allies in Italy. It was a tragic end for a tank that could have made a real difference. Like Germany, Italy saw the value in turretless tank destroyers, or semoventi. These were often more effective than their tank counterparts. The first major one was the semoventi 4732, which mounted a 47mm gun on an L6/40 light tank chassis. It was small, stealthy, and packed a decent punch for its size. But the real stars were the Semovente DA-75s. The first version, the Semovente 75-18, was based on the M13/40 chassis and mounted a short-barreled 75mm howitzer. They were loved by their crews and feared by their enemies. Later versions like the 75-34 and 75-46 mounted longer, higher-velocity guns, making them even more potent tank killers. It could destroy any Allied tank from long range. Its only problem was that it carried very few rounds and was built in tiny numbers. The most powerful of all was the Semovente DA-105-25. Based on the M15/42 chassis, it mounted a 105mm artillery piece. Most were taken over and used by the Germans after the armistice. Of course, armies don't just run on tanks. We have to talk about armored cars. It was fast, with dual driver controls, so it could be driven backwards at high speed to escape danger.